after you've been struck by lightning loops. There's still the fury of rolling thunder, the deafening roar and cyclone force of Great Adventure's 2 mighty new wood coasters. You're plunged from the top of a towering drop, white-knuckled and trembling, lashed to and fro, screaming through space. 50 miles an hour, you ride out the rage of its hurricane blow. Rolling Thunder, have you got what it takes to weather the storm? Rolling Thunder, only at Great Adventure.
Great Adventure would like you to experience the ultimate thrill. First, you'll drop 10 stories. Then hurtle forward into a 360-degree loop. And if that's not enough, you'll do it backwards. Six Flags Great Adventure introduces the ultimate thrill, the new Ultra Twister. Once you ride it, you may never be the same. Ultra Twister, only at Great Adventure.
Let's be honest. If you rode the Ultra Twister, you were lucky. That ride was down more than it was up. But it was a good ride when it was up.
It was down before you knew it. But I rode it once and I got stuck in the
just
front
me?
seat, which was awesome.
And is it just me, or was that not Rolling Thunder in the Rolling Thunder commercial?
No, I thought that too when I saw it, but I was laughing because that's the real commercial for it.
Oh, it's great.
Oh, man. Well, hello and welcome to episode 6 of Some Great Adventures, the podcast where old friends who met and worked for a significant amount of time at Six Flags Great Adventure in Jackson, New Jersey, chat about our time at the park. I'm Steve Hicks. My co-hosts are
Scott Loudon.
Chris Peluso.
Andy, you're a co-host now. Andy's like, oh yeah, I just forgot I got promoted. Full time. Our podcast continues to be made possible by our friends at the Shared Universe Podcast Studio. Ming Chen is running things behind the scenes right now. I think he might be passing off the big kahuna later on. Look them up on Facebook or their direct website if you have any interest in podcasting. They can help you do it all. We're also on Facebook Live, and the video will be available on our Facebook page after it's done, and it's live right now, obviously. Today is the first of our 2-part episode, East vs. West Challenge. On this episode, Andy and I, along with 2 of our special guests, will explain why we firmly believe the motto, West is best. Next month, Chris and Scott and their guests will explain why they think the East is the bee's knees, because there's nothing else that rhymes with East. So that's all I can come up with. To be clear, we're defining West as the fountain to the arena. So it's really ride sections 120 and 130. And East is the fountain to the employee area. So it's ride sections 140, 150, and 160. So I'm very happy to introduce our 2 special guests, both part of our Western Rides family, Debbie Levine and Tony Rosa. We always like to hear our guests' own history in the park before we start and kick off anything else. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Debbie. Give us your history. When did you start and why did you end up leaving?
Oh, sadness. Hi, everybody. Debbie Levine. Back then, I was Debbie Cohen. I worked at Great Adventure. In 1985, I started. One of my friends came up to me and said, hey, I'm going to apply for a job. Come with me. Little did I know I was going to end up working there for 7 years. I worked there in 85 to 91, started at the paddle boats, just like Steve and Andy did.
Battle boat.
Battle boats.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a small place. You guys.
How about that, right?
You were the paddle boats.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of times, if you got put in 120, it was kind of the equivalent where if you got put in 160, they didn't automatically put you on Congo Rapids. They usually put you in Koala fucking Canyon, and you work your way up to it. The paddle boats was kind of the starter ride too. So yeah.
Right. After paddle boats, went to log flume, got promoted to assistant lead, to lead, then promoted to supervisor. Then I went on to be a training supervisor in the training center, then 150 suit, then 140 suit, 160 suit. So I bring some unique perspective to this little debate that we're having here, because I started in Western, of course, West is best, and went on to the other sections as well. So I really only left because I went away to school. I decided to go on for my bachelor's degree, moved to Florida. So but definitely during those years, I made some of the best friendships ever, still maintain many of them. My family, what can I say?
Yeah, for sure. What was it like? What was it like being in the training suit?
Actually, that was kind of great because that's where I really met people from all the other sections there too. Being in there, I felt like I had so much experience and knowledge to share with everybody, all the newbies, all the orientation. And that's actually part of some of my career now. Mentoring is a big part of that. I'm in fundraising now, but I'd love to be able to help all the people who are just, coming into the field. And so that was kind of fun to be able to share that stuff, with all the new ride operators.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have figured that out, that like a lot of our successes has come from stuff that we learned absolutely from our time during the park. Like it's amazing how that is, especially if you went into the corporate world, you would never think you're being trained properly for the corporate world. But, when you have guests that are threatening to punch you in the face and then you're only handling a call center, it's like threaten all you want. You're on the phone. Fuck you. What are you going to do in a minute? I unloaded a big wheel, bitch. You don't do nothing. It's like, it's
unbalanced.
Exactly. Serious training.
Hey, Debbie, were you a 140 soup in 1990?
I was.
You were my first ride supervisor.
I thought so, right? You're like rotor or something.
I was a Buccaneer.
Right?
Yes.
Buccaneer.
Buccaneer attendant.
Right now, Scott's trying to remember, did Debbie give me my first or my second almost firing write-up? Which one was it?
I was clean in 1990, my friend. It wasn't until 91 that I went off the rails.
I don't believe you were ever clean, but whatever you say, Scott.
But I remember one story from you. It was like, and it shows how the park changed from the time I started till the time I left. It was like one of the ride attendants at the bumper cars was like messing around with a guest who was unruly and was pretending to like swing the height stick at him. And I thought he was going to get in trouble. And you're like, oh, that's so funny. I believe it was you. Yeah. But
that's great.
Let's be honest. It was probably somebody you liked, somebody that was like a good employee generally, and you're like, they get a pass. That Scott guy, though, don't fucking swing that skit. Don't swing that guy.
I mean, I definitely had the. I guess people obviously thought that obviously sweet and friendly and kind and whatever, but I have a side to me where I'm a rule follower and definitely would make sure that the people who are not following the rules were. Definitely got write-ups and things like that too. But obviously, if you're doing your job and you showed up, I'm going to get along with you. So
it's a good thing you weren't my supervisor in 91 then. I probably would have been canned before the end of that.
So you're fun. You're a little bit different, I think, than most of us, Debbie. So you didn't spend most of your time in West. You actually only spent like a portion in West, and you spent a good portion everywhere.
Like 3 years, before. Yeah, okay. But I did work some of the winters and stuff too. So I was there in the off seasons too. So I had some of that background too.
Gotcha.
But the years in Western were just, what can I say? Awesome years. Like we've talked about this outside of this. Just all the friendships that we made. And working night shift, there's nothing like that. Yeah. Because we're cleaning up afterwards, and we're going to parties afterwards, and we're going to Wawa afterwards, and
Wawa, yes. Wawa, I love it.
That was back when it was the little Wawa, not the big one.
Yep.
I met my husband there too, my former husband there too. So what can I say? It's awesome.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. All right. Tony.
Yeah. Tony, there goes the neighborhood. Who let him in here?
So a little bit of my history. I started in the park in '89. At the time that I started, it was one of the only jobs around me that you could get because they had bus transportation back then. So they used to bus us from the base. At the time I lived on base. They used to bus us right in. So I started as a orange tag at 15. And at the time, and Scott knows this, you could only work 2 departments really, and that was grounds or foods. So I ended up working foods that first year, which was, an interesting experience. I worked all over the park. I was afloat, so I got a little taste of everywhere in the park. And then as soon as I turned 16, I was trying to get into rides because that's really where everybody wanted to go. That was the department, right? So I worked in rides from after '89, from '90 until about '96. I worked in rides. All on the Western end, which is the best, right? I was lead. Well, my first ride was Coaster, which there's a special place in my heart for that ride, for sure. That was in 1990. From then I moved on to Western Cables, became lead there. I was lead at Mine Train, Log Flume, and then back at Coaster my last year in rides. And I think that was 96. And then 96, I worked in the foods office for a short time. And then I worked in a department called Point of Sales, or POS. And I spent the rest of my time in POS until I left the park in 2000. POS were basically, it was like a really not well-known department in the park. There was only a handful of us in that department, but it was awesome. I mean, you got to go all around the park. We fixed all the registers, all of the point of sales equipment. We dealt with investigations during my time there as well. We termed a lot of people for theft and things like that. That was an interesting part of the job. And I worked there all the way, even after I graduated college. I used to work there, on the weekends, but then it just got too much. I was working like 2 jobs, and that was it for me.
Gotcha. You have a unique thing though, because I believe for a 6-month period, the second half of one season, you worked on a special project.
Oh yes, yeah. I forgot to mention I was part of the Frontier project that Andy and Steve bailed on. And so that was interesting. I think it was a great idea. I just think that starting that in the middle of the season maybe was not the best plan that they had. I think that if everybody knew what they were getting into in the beginning of that season, I think maybe there'd been much more success. But it was kind of chaotic in the beginning, and then at the end of it, it just ended up that instead of working multiple departments like foods and grounds, everybody just kind of worked their own original department, and a few people floated and kind of bounced around. But yeah, I think that was a one and done. I think initially they wanted to do that throughout the whole park, but for whatever reason they scrapped that idea. I think there was a good idea in concept, but
right,
it didn't work out.
Yeah, we still want to talk about that. We might have an episode where we definitely do a little bit of a more focus on that project. That still interests the crap out of us, which is ironic because when it happened, me and Andy couldn't be less interested. We couldn't run from that any faster.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody was interested in it.
It's true.
Somebody must have been up top. But
it's true. The few people I talked to about it, like Tony, were always like, "Well, I mean, I didn't really have a choice. I kind of was stuck there. If I had to do it. So,
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny."
Exactly.
I don't know. You have Tony as a witness here for why West is best, and you're going to bring him back for 120 project. This is a little 34 here.
Well, remember,
strike this
120 project is its own thing. That's not a West thing. That was if that succeeded, that was going to be like the Borg. It was taking over the whole park. Had nothing to do with West. They just decided because West is best, we might as well start it in the best section and then put it out to the peon sections. I think that's how it started. But,
and that's possible.
That's one perspective.
Maybe they figured who really goes to that section anyway.
I know.
Cool. What was the deal with 140 being part of the East? I thought nobody was taking responsibility.
We agreed before this.
Andy, you were on the call. I always said it's from the fountain over. That's what I said.
That was a neutral zone.
There's no 140. There's no.
But what I did say is you don't have to talk about a specific section if you don't want to, which is the perfect segue. So let's get into our conversation about the West Side. So I think it's safe to say that none of us here were 130 soups, and none of us were ever assigned to 130. So our focus is not going to be on 130. It's going to be on 120 because that's where we really have our love for the park. But unlike you guys who just want to pretend Fantasy Forest doesn't exist, okay? I'm not going to pretend 130 doesn't exist because there's definitely people in 130 who love 130. And, I'm a firm believer in probably wherever you spent the most time in those years, those teenage years, and liked it, fully liked it, had fun. That's where your love's going to be. So for me, I spent the most time as a black tag and rides, a red tag and rides in 120, and then a blue tag everywhere. But I'm not going to lie, even as a blue tag, it's an equal love between my time in 160 and my time in 120. Very split down the middle. But if I had to say where my love of the park came from, it came because all my best years were as a black tag and a red tag in 120. That was, that's where I never felt like I was working. The guests could piss me off all I want, but everybody I'm working with, we all laughed at them. So it didn't matter. Like nothing bothered us. It was always just pure. I look forward to getting up and going to work. I can't say I do that every day now, but I certainly did back then, So that's a different mentality. And I think that's where you fall into your love of the park. Now, unfortunately for you, Scott, you weren't allowed to be cool and come to 120. So you don't know the love of the West, okay? We kept your kind on the other side.
God, I think you're as cool as they come, baby.
I digress.
So there is one thing. Somebody named Marcus just posted Dream Streets. So yeah, okay, I can't ignore 140 completely because the cables were there.
I was gonna say,
it's also where you started, dude. You started on the fucking year. Why did you not bring that up?
I thought we did talk about it being a neutral zone, but it's actually my fondest memory as a child going in the 80s. That's what I think of. I think of the Buccaneer. I think of the Big Wheel. I think of the cable cars. I actually do really like 140, but it was funny to say.
So you just nailed on the head why I want to bring up 130 is not like we're going to avoid it. Here's you just nailed it right on the head, Chris. The carousel. Okay.
Right,
the carousel is amazing. The carousel is absolutely freaking gorgeous. Okay. And it's also one of those rides where I brought up did a little bit of lookup on the carousel here. Hold on. Let me find it here. So the carousel, I did not even know this all my time working there. I always knew I loved the carousel. I always thought the carousel was kind of cool and it was very pretty. And when I was a kid, I remember the first thing I would come in, we would see the fountain and then my family would go to the carousel. It was always the first thing we did, That carousel, that particular carousel was bought from Jimmy Williams Traveling Show in England and was built in 1881. Wow. That carousel, which is still running right now, is 140 freaking years old. Okay.
I don't like that anymore.
Now they changed it when they originally bought it. It was steam run, and then it got changed over, obviously, to electrical run after time. But that's insane to think that carousel is that old and still running and still iconic. And also think about how pretty that ride is. I mean, it's got the mirrors in the center. At one time it had music. I don't know if it still does or not, because I remember it went away while I was there and then they brought it back. And I know originally when it was there for the first 4 or 5 years, it had an actual organ in it, which I know they took that out because I'm sure they just didn't want to pay for the upkeep on that. But it had all the multicolored lights. If you remember, I remember the few times I did have to cover 130, it was always, remember he had the maintenance reports for all the shit that was broken? It would always be like carousel, 87 broken lights, because it had 1,000 multicolored lights on the damn thing, And then also, what's the proper term? Cockerels, the roosters and the horses. Yes. I would say the only downside to the carousel that I always thought was that it was gorgeous. It was always supposed to be gaudy, and from the history I saw of it, that was on purpose because they wanted to catch your eye and go right to it. Right. But they would always repaint those goddamn horses every year, and I always thought they would. God, Andy. Yeah. They would dim them though every year.
That was the main entrance of the park. Originally was down by the carousel.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah. And but I always thought every year when they kept painting them, they were making them look duller. They should have just stripped them and really gave them a good paint job. That was the only downside I ever saw of the carousel from working there. But even the things like the brass poles that they kept brass, they didn't try to change them, and we know because in work crew we had to clean those goddamn things by hand, But all that stuff, that's amazing, And then there's other things in 130. First of all, boardwalk area is 130. And if it wasn't for boardwalk area, none of us were going to be game supervisors because that's really the bulk of the games, So that's pretty big. Right Stuff. That was the beginning and the ending of Scott's career. So, that's where we managed him at the end. But let's be honest, when Right Stuff was first put in, that simulator was pretty cool. That was fun to go in, get in the AC, and just chill out. If you're a supervisor, that was a a good test ride.
I loved it when they switches over to Dino Park.
I did too.
Yes,
absolutely, man, that was fantastic.
And Scott's demise being categorized as a plus or a minus? Which one? Is it a positive or a negative?
It's a positive. Shut up, Peluso.
Oh, right? Come on. I thought it was a negative. Sorry, Scott.
Here's another thing that's not there. There's two things that aren't there anymore that I thought were really cool when I was a kid. Pet-a-Pet. Petapet was amazing. And honestly, Petapet's the only reason I ever got into work crew. If it wasn't for Petapet and me having to clean goat and camel, baby camel poop, I would never have got work crew jobs. So, but Petapet as a kid was pretty damn cool. And the other thing that was really cool, and I don't know if any of you guys remember it, originally it was a miniature area, but then it became a chip golf, miniature golf course.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yeah,
Our
as a
family,
kid.
yeah, as a kid, our family would always go carousel right into there, and we would walk through there. And it was what was it originally called? I have it written down here. It was called the Garden of Marvels, and it was a 1/24th scale miniature village. And that thing was massive. It was so huge. And it's funny because I remember I loved models, so I always thought it was really cool as a kid. But then it's as I got older, as most people do, I was like, oh, it's kind of a waste. I'm never going in there again. And now I miss it. Now I wish it was still there, you know, but that was really cool. That was a cool 130 thing. And then I know one of you brought this up at one time, might have been you, Debbie, but Sarajevo bobsled. That was pretty damn cool too. That was a cool ride that was there. So
My wife's favorite.
it was Sam. That's
She
who brought
loved
it up.
it.
I couldn't
She
remember who it
loved
was
the
when we were having a
bobsled.
free talk. Yeah.
And I actually loved, I don't know if you remember this, the promo, bring a snowball, get in free. I always remember putting them in the freezer. My brothers, we got to put snowballs in the
Ice balls.
freezer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was in
That's
150.
funny.
Yeah, with, bobsled.
What was it?
Bobsled was in 150 when I was in 150.
I always thought it was
It was in the back,
130.
like across from Free Fall.
I don't know.
It was, but I remember the
Bobsled was where
bobsled was
Scream Machine
over
was.
by Free Fall, yeah.
It might have moved at some point then.
Andy, do you remember being around Scream Machine? Because
bobsled
Oh, I'm thinking
was
Swiss Bob.
Oh,
I was-
Swiss
all
Bob,
right, because
yeah.
I'm like,
where
there
Scream
is
Machine
a
is.
Scream Machine, right? All right, thank you, Andy. Because I'm like, wait, I'm not going crazy here, am I?
There was Bobsled, you're right. Two different rides.
Those are
Swiss
the
Bob
original
was cool too.
bobsleds.
I mean, you know.
Thank you, Andy. That was fun. Yeah, Swiss Bob.
And the last thing I will bring up on 130. Look, BBL, man, you guys can all shit on BBL and be like, that's a detriment. But if you were a lead or a supervisor and you had a real pain in the ass employee who was annoying you and you were overstaffed, bye, you're going to BBL for the day. And you felt good about it. Yeah.
Was there a pun intended there when you said shit on BBL?
Dude, somebody posted a picture of the Monkees, the band, all in the ball crawl, and I couldn't stop laughing when I saw it because all I kept thinking is if they knew what they were sitting in right now, they would not have those smiles on their face, you know.
Nice.
It cracked me up, man.
The history of BBL, wasn't it also in 120 for?
It got passed back and forth a couple times, but the bulk of the time that I've been at the park, it's been in 130. I think it was only in 120 for 1 year, and never when I was a soup. Only when I was maybe a lead.
Just keeping it real here. We gotta acknowledge 140. You gotta acknowledge.
Well, no. I'm acknowledging it's West. It's West, dude. I think it's a pro. Also, by the way, BBL had some cool ass rides. They had the Red Baron ride with the little throttle, and you could go up and down in the end. And they also had a Western Railroad ride to theme with the West when they were with the part of the West. They actually had a little Texas Western Railroad ride for kids. So, Scott, that was cool. All right.
I don't remember the railroad ride, but the Red Baron was cool. I used to love that.
It was not a cool place to work. Did you
what's
ever
funny?
work
But
BBL?
our people who did work there, I gotta say, our regular crew there, our regular
100%.
we're all like really hardworking people, and they came back like
Absolutely.
every year. They were pretty loyal. They just weren't enough of them. You know, it took so many people to staff that place.
It took a special person to be able to actually stay in there as like that's my section. That's where I'm working is BBL. And the other thing is, let's be honest, did all of you actually have to work in BBL at one point, like ride operate in BBL? I did many
Yes.
times. You all did, right? Kids were awesome. I never had a problem with the kids. It was the
Kids
fucking
were great.
annoying ass parents.
So
I
yeah.
never held it against the kids. The kids were adorable. If the kids were having fun, it was great. I actually loved it. It's the fucking annoying parents. I'd be like, seatbelt. They're not going to get hurt. It's not going anywhere. Shut up. You know.
I think my problem with BBL was as a teenage guy, I was like, there was no chicks there like that you could hit on or pick up. I mean, you have the moms and you have their little kids. Like the teenage girls weren't coming to BBL. So
I think that was the biggest problem is you were isolated away from everybody else because you had your own little ride. You couldn't talk to anybody else that was like with you. Whereas when you work in some of the other major rides, you had a big crew and you could talk.
Right.
That's true.
And all that
That
sort
is
of
true.
thing.
Was there any? Wasn't shade an issue there too? I can't remember because I actually only walked.
If
I
you
only
were-
walked halfway there. I never actually had to work it. Halfway there, I got pulled.
So yeah, so sort of. If you were in the center section, yes. But if you remember, they built the shade. They built that whole entire structure.
Right.
That was specifically because of that.
Later on,
and they also put the crappy blue padding down, which did prevent a lot of shins in cut knees and stuff. But used to rip up by work crew. We'd be like watching bits of blue everywhere, like the coming off the ground. But that shade was something for a while. But they did actually put that stuff up to take care of it. So
yeah, because I souped it a couple times, of course, and I remember some people being burnt, just burnt. Yeah.
I covered breaks there a couple of times, and just from doing like a 45-minute break, I was like red as a lot. I mean, I turned red 2 minutes into the sun, so for me, I'd come out look like a lobster every time. Yeah. All right, so let's get off 130. That's enough from the 130 talk. See, that's my obligatory 130. Oh, I will say one thing about 130. The Great American Screen Machine crew was always great. Every time I covered 130 as a supervisor, and that was the only big ride I ever really had to worry about. I mean, no other ride was anything that you'd ever have to seriously worry about evacuating or anything. And the crew was so effing good. And there's almost always a mechanic down there in that shed too. So it was like the few times I had to unload that ride, they were fantastic. So shout out to the GASM crew in the 80s and 90s. They were fantastic.
Well, one of our East brothers there, Scott, is making a valid point, I think.
Yeah, I mean that's a dude who wears a Robin outfit, from what I was told. So I'm not even looking at that comment. Okay,
I can't wait. I can't wait to see what he brings to the table. Great man.
Yeah, can't wait. I'm sure it'll be thrilling. All right,
Neil, I'm with you, Neil.
Solidarity, my friend.
Solidarity.
All right, so let's actually. Yeah, go ahead, Debbie.
Tony touched on something. He said that Bugs Bunny Land, obviously you worked by yourself, so there was no big crew. And I think that's what Western had. We had big crews because we had rides.
So again, it's almost like you guys are reading my mind, because as we start going into the Western, we're going to segue, talk about Western, and I'll jump in first. And my first point, which is insane that you just said that, Debbie, is it's almost all major rides. Western was very few flat rides. So the employees in Western, and this is not as a slam to anybody, and you'll understand in a minute, but they had a little more pride in working in Western, because generally we cross-trained like a motherfucker. So when you were cross-trained in Western, it wasn't like I knew the bumper cards, the Buccaneer, the Condor, the Rotor, and I'm only saying that because you understand what I'm saying. Like, those are kind of simplified rides. You don't take a lot of pride in operating them. They're really simple, right? Yeah. You were cables, log flume, coaster, mine train, ultra twister, whatever the hell big ride was in that spot, because it changed like 75 times. But you were almost all major rides, and you took a little bit more pride. And you guys can't dispute that, because if you're in 160, what did everyone say, including all the 160 employees? Fucking rapid snobs. Oh, yeah. Why were they rapid snobs? Because if you knew how to operate the rapids and you knew what you were doing, that's a little bit of pride. And 150, how many times did I hear free fall fucking snobs? And it wasn't just because they got all that money at the end of the night. It's because that free fall was a bitch to learn. And if you learned it, that was a serious pride ride.
You can work anything,
Absolutely, no doubt. So, major rides, I think, had a little bit more of a different type of mindset. And that's one of the things about the Western, is that there were very, very few small rides. So it gave you a little more pride. And I think that was a big point to make. And then a second point that I'll make is that I think each ride has its own special thing. Okay, that if you work there, you will always remember. You're never going to forget. So Marcus Noble just posted something that cracked me up. Okay, if you work the log flume, at least once a year, somebody dumped the soap in the log flume, and it became the suds flume, and it was just soap suds everywhere.
I do remember. I used to be so jealous of not being able to go and see it when it happened.
See,
I agree.
Yeah. So I mean, and let's Marcus, the perfect segue. Let's get right into the log flume, man. So log flume. Okay. First of all, back in the days we worked there were no such thing as cell phones, but there was a party line on a log flume because up top where you had 4 people, they would just sit there on that phone bullshitting all day, having fun. And if you're in the lifts, it's so funny because the phone would be sitting like this, so nobody down below supervisor stuff could see you on it, but you were on it, you know? And so you had your own little party line. The flume had flume photo. So if you were friends with people like Jackie Ruger and Dina DeZio and all that, there would be so many people who would just flash that camera. If you knew who was working at Flume Photo, at the end of the day, they'd be like, hey, look at this, look at this, look at this. You'd be like, oh, you know? So there's a bonus for working there. Let's see what else. If you were unlucky enough to have to clean the grates, so the pumps that run the log flume have a grate, okay? And if you're unlucky enough to have to scrape them, sometimes that luck turned into a treasure because you would find wallets out the ass, you would find purses, you would find Ray-Bans all the time back in the 80s. It was like a Ray-Ban heaven. You would find sunglasses almost every day. So there was a little bit of bonus to that. Let's see. When we're talking about skill, if you knew how to operate lift 2, I'm not going to count lift 1 because lift 1 was kind of pretty easy, but lift 2 took some skill. And if you actually had a boat backup, you could actually get them out if you properly knew how to do it. So there was definitely some skill in that ride, even though it may not seem it, there was absolutely skill in it. And there was skill in running it as well. And then I have to mention this because a gentleman, I don't think I know, but his name is Bob Weingartner. He brought up the snake pit. So anyone that worked at Log Flume, or Tony, you mentioned working POS,
Yeah,
so you know about it too.
So I know Bob. Bob was my supervisor in POS. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, so we had the famous snake pit over there in front of Log Flume. And, a lot of snakes came out of there. And we were tasked occasionally with going down there because there were some conduits and there was a junction box down there in that rocky area, which we called the snake pit, where we had to go down there and make sure everything was connected at times. And you had to dodge the snakes and try not to step on them as you're climbing down the rock. So it was like right behind, there was like a food stand there, like, one of those portable stands, like a pretzel stand or something like that. Yeah. But it was right behind there. It was like this little ditch and there was like water that went through there. And it was filled with rocks and snakes and
so,
interesting.
Did you ever hear a mostly grown man scream like a little girl when he came across a snake?
Occasionally. Yeah, occasionally that happened.
Okay, I thought that was only a 160 thing with Pete, but, I guess.
I'm not going to lie. I don't like snakes. I never did the Pete scream, but I've seen them many a times coming in because you'd have to pass the snake pit going to the entrance basically into Log Flume. So there'd be many times I'd see like all different colored snakes just sunbathing, sitting right there in the walkway and be like, nope, going all the way around, not dealing with that shit. Nope. So, yeah. All right. So, and then the last thing, which Debbie King just brought up, you're stealing my thunder, Debbie. Log Flume was the primo spot during good concert nights because if you got the lift 2, if you were an operator and you had to be an operator to work lift 2, you just sat up there and you got the best seat in the house to listen and watch concerts, man. It was fantastic. So that was a huge perk of the Log Flume. And then the other side perk is, as me and Andy, when we were like, 16, 17-year-old kids working a Log Flume, how many phone numbers did we get off of that ride? Jesus Christ. Like, it was like, by the time the cute girl was off lift 1, we already had people in station ready to hand them paper to write their number down. It was crazy. Yeah, it was definitely a ride. You could get a lot of dates off it too. So that was another little interesting thing about Log Flume. I'm not even going to bring up paddle boats because we've talked about paddle boats before, but paddle boats was unique. It's its own little thing. It's a buy up. It was a ride, but you had to pay for it, and it was run by rides. And but for all of us, it was like training to go to the big rides. It was like considered like our flat ride kind of, And the only other real flat rides I can remember, there really weren't a lot in 120 ever. There was El Sombrero, which Phil brought up, but there was El Sombrero, the hat. And there was the rotor at one time.
I think they called it. It was like the rotor.
Typhoon. It was a rotor, yeah. And honestly, I don't even remember any other flat rides in 120. Do you guys?
No, they just had the other kind of things where you like. Oh, was that in 120? No, it was 130.
Tilt the World used to be where Sombrero was.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
you're right. It was for a time, a short time. Yeah. By the way, Scott, I'll always remember a little Manish coming out of BBL when I was a 120 soup and going, "Excuse me, sir, I want to work the El Sombrero." And he knew that was his gateway to get out of BBL and to get into 120. And a little son of a bitch, it worked because I did get put him on the El Sombrero. And now we're all stuck with Manish for the rest of our lives because I made that move.
Yeah.
Very smart, though.
That's
And it literally was like,
right there.
it was very much like the, "May I have another bowl of soup, sir?" It was very much like that. And he was so polite. Little I know that was not who he is, you know?
It was even better listening to him tell a story about how he wound up in BBL. He's like, you know, I didn't want to work it, but Gigi just batted her eyelashes at me a couple times. And next thing I know, I'm like, okay, I'll go to BBL.
I see that. I totally see that. That's funny. All right. Cables. I mean, Tony, you could definitely talk about cables much more than I can. And Andy, probably you could too. But I will say, for me, cables had a lot of cool hidden spots. Every year they became more safety violations. They would shut them down. But in that fort, there were so many cool spots as an employee you could kind of go to and look over things and everything. Oh, yeah. And the whole under the fort where the counterweights were was its own little world. And during the time that I was a soup, there was a ground shed down there that had a goddamn burger time machine. So if you had a bad day, you just went down there with grounds and played some burger time and everything got better, you know? So anything else about cables you guys could think of?
Now, cables was just a great place to work. You'd be up high, so that nice breeze be coming in station.
God, yeah.
I think I remember you guys saying something about a convenient bathroom.
Yeah. The urine dungeon.
Something about a convenient bathroom. I'm not sure if that's a plus or minus either.
I'll be quite honest with you. If you were an employee working there, you're dead on, Chris. It was convenient as hell. It was right there. Yeah. It was a lot quicker than the bathroom behind the Dream Street cables because it was fun, man.
Until you walk into the closet and catch Tony dropping a deuce over the railing.
I know that. There were some folks that did, though. I can tell you that.
What did they use for toilet paper? Or did they just rub their butt along the railing?
No, there was always one of those brown hand rolls right from the bathrooms. Like there's always one of those in there. I swear to God,
there was a hand roll there.
There was a hand roll of paper towels always in there, and I always thought it was like for cleanliness, and then I didn't realize until work crew that's not what it was for. You know,
it was for those emergency dumps that you know.
Yeah, but another cool thing about cables, and Andy, you brought this up for a short period of time. Cables was where the fireworks was. Right there over that little lake in front of the cables is where the fireworks was. So for a short period of time, you got to enjoy that as well.
Yep, shut down at 9:30, and then you could just hang out and watch the fireworks.
Yep.
Well, that whole area, that whole fort structure, you know, with cables and mine train, I mean, that is everything that you saw then, even though those postcards and the marketing materials, I mean, that is what, when you think of Great Adventure,
that's the iconic.
Would show you, right?
Yep.
It's visually
it was all designed around that.
Yeah.
When we started there, it wasn't that old. It was only.
So look, the Western section was featured, guys.
Yeah.
So it was like, when was the park built? Like the early 70s? So that was like when Westerns were like really popular, right? Movie-wise and everything, I guess.
Yeah, the park opened in 74. There's a really great website run by Tom Benton and Harry Applegate. Not our Harry Applegate, by the way. I did find out that is a completely separate Harry Applegate. It's not our Harry that's now Carrie. It's a totally separate person. But it's called GreatAdventureHistory.com, and they have a page for each section. And their opening for the Western section says, like most theme parks, Great Adventure featured a Western theme section with all the excitement and adventure of America's Western frontier. While most parks offered a version of the Old West where the buildings were scaled down, Warner Leroy's vision was quite the opposite, with the structures like the fort, the super teepee, and the Conestoga wagon created in major oversized scale. The effect was amazing, making the rootin' tootin' rip-roaring area of the park the strongest thematic statement of the park and the most memorable. And by the way, that is what they originally referred to the Western section as, the rootin' tootin' rip-roaring Western. And that is, I mean, I was going to talk about each ride individually, but I will say, while we're talking about the theming, you're dead on, Debbie. I mean, that is the one thing that I think also gives me a little bit more love for Western when I think back on the park, is that the theming never changed. They themed it in the beginning and they kept the theme. And I guarantee, I haven't been there in like 8 years, and I'm going to go this summer with my cousin and our family. And I guarantee when I go, it's still going to be there. you know what I mean? Like the teepee may be gone because the one storm and all that, but there's still going to be the Western theme in that area. It's still going to look like the West. You know, the fort is still going to be there. A lot of the individual theming, like the taco place and all that, you know, that's all still going to look like the West. And I always thought that was kind of a detriment of Six Flags. And this isn't an Eastern slam. This is an everything slam. Everywhere else, the only other side of the park they tried to make that effort, in my opinion, was Movie Town. Movie Town, they tried to make the effort, but then some of it just didn't make any sense. Like some of the rides, you're like, this isn't a movie. What are you doing? You know, but it wasn't really themed kind of properly. And, you know, you could see where they were just like, we need a little more throughput, flat ride, name it after some type of side thing from a movie. Who cares? You know, and it's like theming was forced.
Warner Brothers, I think, started that, and then Warner Brothers left. So I think that had an impact on it for sure. It was probably a plan to do more, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, they still kept it going with Chiller, I guess, and whatnot. But yeah, Movie Town water effects, the stretch, centrifuge, a little bit of a stretch.
Exactly. Exactly. But I will say, at least that section they do try to, if nothing else, keep it as a superhero theme. So that's the closest I could think. I mean, Adventure Rivers. Yeah, that's a theme, but then they open the water park and they kind of shit all over that theme. So yeah, but yeah, the theming is iconic as hell. There's no doubt about that. And let's hit the other ride. So Mine Train. First of all, when we're talking about skilled operations, I mean, when they could run 3 trains, which you guys will probably never even experience or even saw, and you only saw if you won't even remember it, but when you were a kid, that's how they ran. 3 trains was a fucking skill. Very few operators could properly operate 3 trains, because 3 trains, you had like, I don't remember the exact time, but if I'm remembering, I think it was 3 minutes to get them in, out, and out. Like that's all you had. Before the next train was sitting out there, and you can never have the 3rd train get behind the last train or you're fucked. So you kind of had to know the skill.
No, you had about 45 seconds to load the train.
It was insane. I mean, you had to move. And so it wasn't just a skill as an operator. This is the thing. It's the rare ride where even if you were only an attendant, you were treated like gold, because if you fucking sucked as an attendant, the ride was going to go down. Like you relied on those attendants to get those goddamn people out, and attendants were actually able to ride the train in and kick the kick pedals to unload them to get them out faster. That became a safety violation. They weren't allowed to do that anymore. But in the beginning, when I was first there, we were totally allowed to do that, and it was a skill. And it was like, that was amazing. And then other things about the Mine Train that were really cool. First of all, thematically, also tied into the fort. You know, you always felt like you were part of the cable crew. Queue lines, when you clean them, you're kind of like, hey, you help each other out all the time, you know. And that was another thing about Western. When Debbie's talking about family, we were like a family. Like it wasn't like if I had extra people at the log flume and they only had like 2 people working cables at the end of the night, I sent my people over there and we all cleaned our own shit. Like we all helped each other out. Now the rest of the park used to get pissed off because 120 would never go to the lots. We would never go to the lots. But the reality of it is we had major ride queues we had to clean, and those were a pain in the ass. And to be honest with you, at night, most of the lighting sucked. So it was really hard to find the cans and the bottles and the bushes behind the queue line. So it did take a little more to clean. But I'm not going to say we didn't scam. We totally freaking scammed. We would never go beyond the carousel ever. Like carousel was our point. If we even set people up there, maybe it was 2 or 3 people. But we did get screwed and always had to do the ski show path. Yeah. You guys never had to do it. We would own the ski show pass. That's one thing we would take and Log Flume used to do. But and the other cool thing about Mine Train is Mine Train had a show right where the employee entrance was, underneath where the operator area was, where the staircase was. There was it went through a bunch of names, but the last name I remember was Tales from Tombstone. There was a gun show right there. There's a Western gunfighter show right there. So every day while you're operating, you can literally turn around and watch a gun show. You know? So that was kind of cool, you know? So that made it a little more special as well, I think. And then let's see. What
about like the shootout in Best of the West area?
So again, we go to themes. Yeah. So you have shootout. Theming, Best of the West restaurant. People will always still talk about the barbecue there and all that. And, you know, I never had to work food. So as far as I knew, it was fine. I'm sure Tony probably has stories, but we're not going to go into that. But, Debbie King just brought up Viper had an amazing theme. I'll be honest with you, I barely even remember Viper very much. I think when Viper was put in there, I think I was already down to 160 because I don't remember dealing with Viper very much.
You were. I had to with Viper when I became a supervisor. So
that's what I thought. Because I was going to say, I'm like, I don't have a lot of memories of Viper, but I know I was there when it was there. So that's kind of funny. And then the last one, I mean, look, Coaster. So Coaster, first of all, Coaster had the other maintenance shed. So there were two major maintenance sheds. There was one out over in the employee area, which was the east side maintenance shed. And then there was one in the Coaster, which was considered the west side maintenance shed. And, you know, there is always food in there. That's where you go to chill out. The mechanics were always fun to hang out with. They were all down in there just busting your balls. And Coaster itself was another skilled ride. So you'd have to do train transfers, and not everybody knew how to do them, and they were a big fucking deal. And if you didn't do them properly, the ride was going to be down for
a big production at the Coaster.
It was a big production, man, and you had to know how to do it. And we've seen many people fuck them up. We've seen people screw up and have the train go through the Coaster shed.
Oh yeah,
I remember that
personally. Yeah.
So I mean, again,
the best is when you forget to take the crossbar out when you reopen the ride.
There's that, and let's be honest. So if you were a Coaster operator, you felt powerful knowing how to operate that fucking train on the trims and readies and shit, man. Like, especially in rain and shit, like you knew your shit. And that was a ride where you felt like, I know my shit. You know what I mean? Like, this is a fun ride. And we would race trains. So that was another thing. You would literally get the crowd so
Coaster
fucking
was really like
hyped.
rides.
Yeah. And you would get the crowd hyped up, like, okay, we're dispatching the same time. Our side's going to win. And the other operator would be like, screw you, our side's going to win. And the train would start going nuts, like, we're going to win. You know? Like, so that was kind of cool.
Yeah, people
going up the list at the same time was fun.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
And it's so funny because I even remember they would do that before I even worked there. And I remember as a kid riding it and buying into that shit and being like, we're going to win. And it would take you like it was like 45 seconds, which was a long time for that train to go up. And by the time you got to the top, you weren't yelling anymore. You're like, all right, just come on, let's get rid of it all. You know?
Gotta sort through it.
Yeah. No. Somebody posted this on the Six Flags Great Adventure Facebook group. Somebody posted a picture of the Coaster in demolition. Like it was a picture of that being taken down, which kind of broke my heart, you know? And then there were a lot of comments under it. And this one dude, his name is Jeffrey Belkoff. This is what he posted. And I thought this summed up working at the Coaster so perfectly. He put, I was lead at Western Cables. My ex-girlfriend worked Thunder. I got sent over there one day. It was one of the most fun days I ever had working at Six Flags. She opened A side and I was on B side. We had the entire line into it as far as racing which side would win. We secretly were holding hands the entire time because we were dating. So that meant we had to run the entire operator book one-handed. And not a single under or overshoot of stations. Super fun times. And you had to be an operator to know what that dude was talking about. But you could overshoot the trains if you weren't paying attention, and half the train's out, and then you're fucked because you basically kind of have to cycle them around again. And most people don't want that, you know? So again, skilled ride, you know? So, and
remember, if it was off by like a foot, the electric lap bars wouldn't work.
That's right. I actually forgot about that. Absolutely right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yep. Safety precaution. Yep. And then look, the last thing I'll say, and this has all been pretty much my love of the Western. So obviously I'm going to pass it off to, you know, Andy, Debbie, and Tony to talk about their love. But the last thing I would say that I always thought was really cool about the Western is just when we're talking about the theming, they even themed it down to really, they had decent uniforms. Like Western uniforms looked like Western uniforms. You kind of, when you wore them, you know, not always in the beginning when everybody had the rainbow color ones. I think, Debbie, during your time, there was a point where everybody had the same uniform. But once they actually themed out the sections really well and every section had its own themed uniform, Western had those pretty cool looking Western uniforms. And they were comfortable and they were themed nicely. They kind of looked right, you know? And I think that was kind of a cool thing. They really, you know, they kind of took a pride in making sure the theming was perfect, you know? I mean, I'm not going to, you know, mention a comparison to another section's uniform. Scott, why are you smiling so much right now? You didn't like your Buccaneer uniform? You didn't like your Buccaneer uniform?
Well, that was when I was at Cables, and like that was like the last straw when I left 140. I mean, you know, people getting off and like, you know, basically just all the taunts over those uniforms, man. It was
pretty bad.
Hey, they brought the comedy.
It's true.
They were rather humorous.
It's true. I will say this though, Debbie, you touched on this. We were definitely a family, and that section worked like a family. And it was like we had parties. Everybody went. Like it was like 90% of the people working for the whole day would go, and it was like the party would start at like 6. So day crew would start it, but then night crew would join in. And the other unique thing is that most people stayed there and slept. You almost never had to worry about drunk driving or anything like that back then because nobody wanted to leave. Everyone just wanted to stay and sleep over and hang out. Next morning, we'd all go to breakfast unless you're a day shift. If you're a day shift, those people would generally, either leave or they'd have to get up really stupid early. But otherwise, it was like those parties. People always talk about, like Tony, you mentioned the 160 parties, and people always talk about how good our parties were that we had at the Howe House and, at the beach house stuff. But I based those Howe House parties off the parties I learned back when I was in Western. Those were like my first really formative parties. And the parties weren't just when we were at the park. We were so tight knit that for like a good about a 5-year period, I want to say, from the time I was a black tag through the time I was a red tag, until a lot of people started kind of aging out, like Debbie said, you going to college and not coming back. There was a point where even during the winter, we hung out. People would go to college, we'd visit them. I think I was at more colleges during those winters when I was in high school than I was when I was in college. You know what I mean? Like we went to parties all the time. And, as people, me and Andy's age, 17, 18, we're at these college parties having like the time of our freaking lives. And everything was always safe. Like everybody took care of each other. Everybody watched out for each other, like it was the type parties where, when people were puking, you would laugh at them, but you'd still be holding their head up, That's over the bull, But it was like,
we took some pictures of them puking.
And then we take pictures of them, exactly, But epic parties, and probably also, I want to say where I started going to the Jim Thorpe paintballs that Jim Durar used to do, the skirmish. I think that's when I was in it had to be because it was with the Deacons.
Oh yeah, that was 120. It
was totally when I was in 120, and I know that went beyond my time in 120. But I think the times I went the most where I was in 120, and that was another thing I always looked forward to was like a lot of 120 would go. Like it was a huge sectional thing. Like we all went and we would be our own team, and we would all be playing paintball. And it's like that type of thing, man. I didn't get that anywhere else. There was, I'm not going to say we weren't tight when we were in 160. We were definitely a tight crew, but it was not the same as when I was in 120. When I was in 120, it was like you always felt like you were around family and friends. And I even when people were annoying, you never hated them. It wasn't one of those things where you're just like, I fucking can't work with that person. I don't remember much of that at all. It was like everybody got along for the most part, So it was kind of it's a whole different world, man. It was kind of cool. So on that, I've talked enough. I'm gonna pass it to Andy. Andy, what do you have? What makes your love for Western?
And yes, Steve, just to kind of touch on what you were just saying, like we were together over the winter. I mean, we spent every day together, and they were such big groups of people. I remember going bowling with like 30 people, or going out to some restaurant and, needing a big, table for like 20 people.
Yep.
Showing up at the Court Jester, with 25 people there.
God.
It was always a fun time.
Oh, and Old Silver until
just having those big crews at work. It was nice, just to. Oh, Old Silver.
Until somebody got his banned.
Who got his banned from Old Silver? You're not insinuating that. It was me.
I mean,
that story.
Remember there were certain spots that some people who might not have been of 21 age were able to go and drink.
Oh, I see.
We'll move on. To you, Andy.
Move on from that.
Andy's age at some point, because Andy carried himself older.
I was lucky enough to get into rides when I was 15, so I was hanging out with all you guys. You were all in high school, somewhere in college already, and I got to start drinking at kind of a young age.
Yep.
But we'd go to Old Silver's, and they would serve anybody at Old Silver's.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I have no idea what Old Silver is, but it's like the perfect name.
You
don't even need to know. You can just, it says it all.
It was a bar in English Town, Old Silver Tavern, and they were known for their bar pies. Like people would travel like from towns away to get their bar pies, and their bar pies were excellent. They were like thin crust bar pies, but we would go like there'd be like honestly 30 to 40 of us that would go, and we would just buy pitcher over pitcher over pitcher. And while they were annoyed that they had to deal with such a large group, we always tipped well, and we bought so much food and alcohol that they just dealt with it because they were like, we're making money, bring them in. And me and Andy would be there, and we might not have been of age, so,
man.
but we didn't get carded, so
just hanging out,
Yeah. I wasn't driving. I wasn't old enough to drive yet, so I wasn't
not old enough to drive, but old enough to drink.
And I didn't drink a lot because I had chemistry the next morning, and and I wanted to be in good shape for gym class.
Oh man.
Well, that's true. Like we carpooled because I remember I drove Andy. I drove Andy's brother.
Yeah.
Also in the summer. So like you said, we were family. We were all friends. We did things, in the winter, the bowling. We went to the movies. We went to dinners. We had Super Bowl parties. And during the summer we did the sleepovers. We just really felt comfortable with each other. We were all, there were lots of couples, obviously too. We're at large crews, so that there's just like so many of us, and like Steve said, we were all cross trained. We just had like some great friendships.
Yeah, and actually, you nailed it on the head. When we did our February episode, we talked about the couples that are still couples now, and a large portion of those are old 120 couples. Large portion of them. There were a lot of people that met, dated, and got married and are still married. So it is. I mean, that just shows you how tight the family was. Yeah.
Look, this is like the prime time in our lives. Honestly, not to say that my age now isn't prime time, but I'm just saying that here we were 17, 18, 19, that was like our social life,
Yeah.
That was my college experience. I didn't go away to school or anything. Yeah. That was, anytime people are talking about college and how they had a dorm and all this stuff, I experienced none of that. I experienced great adventure. A lot of great adventures. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
What else, Andy? You got anything else for your love of the West?
Yeah, and then just like we touched on a little before, the section itself was just, I don't know, some of the best times there where we were early in the morning. We were opening the section up. It was about 8:30 before we opened, and it was just a beautiful setup with the landscaping, and walk around back behind Best of the West with the lake there, and it was just a real pretty place to work every day. And
Was that the days
there were lots of cool little hanging out, hiding places.
Yeah.
Were those the days that you didn't show up like completely hungover to work, that you could appreciate the the beauty of it? I remember days showing up to work, I was like, oh my God, like.
Well, let me tell you something. So there is something to be said for that, because when we say we took care of each other, it's not a joke. Some people would get so fucking hungover that we would let them work the log flume. Voluntarily put them up on Shooter Spillway so they could just fucking sober the hell up, and then halfway through the day, after around lunchtime they had to go back to their ride, but we took care of them. You know what I mean? Like if someone was that bad off, that was fine. We put them over there. So we would switch out and take care of.
There were plenty of mornings. People would be like, just let me catch cable cars all day, please. I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to catch cars. It's fine.
Opening was also super fun though, Andy. You nailed it on the head, because I remember like back in our day, you would, as a safety check for coaster before you open it, you'd actually have to walk the track from the top. And I fucking loved it. I used to, when I was the log flume lead, Lisa Simone was the coaster lead, and I would walk over there with my coffee and we would jog the coaster track from the top. And it was fun as shit. Like, I loved it, man. Now, I mean, I'm running 5Ks and I still wouldn't want to go up that fucking coaster track. That thing was a bear. But when I was at that age, I loved it. I thought it was fun, So
it was one of my favorite experiences, work crew, and also one of my roughest days. It was great though.
It was tough, but it was fun. It was definitely fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and
See,
it was
we
a
had a
tough
good time
section to
for the
open.
daily.
You had a lot of things you
Yeah.
had to get done inside, that hour before we opened, and a lot of staffing to move around and everything. So, it was cool opening up 120.
Marcus just said monkey check. That's so funny because that's absolutely true. Log flume monkey check. Nothing was
Oh, yeah.
worse than going in there with the one person who had to go up top, and the person up top's like, all right, I'm not going to shoot or spillway because I see people in the chairs, and you knew it was monkeys. Fucking monkeys sitting in the chairs.
Right, just slowly back away.
Yep.
Got us on that one. We had no monkey.
We had no monkey business.
We had monkeys. We had lots of monkeys.
You found 38.
Cool about 120 is because it was like the furthest part, the furthest section is that, like Andy was saying, was nice and quiet in the morning. And it took a while for guests to come to us, unless people ran to our ride or so. So it would take.
That is true. We didn't really open until like
Extra quiet
11.
time.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask that. Was that ever a thing? Like, as Soups, you probably parked over there, but as Black and Red Tags, you had to walk that thing, right? I mean, that's a hike.
Oh, it's good exercise.
That's a good hike. Yeah. And I was going to say too, I never appreciated it as a young guy, but log flume. That spinning wheel, getting what did you get, like about 30,000 steps a day? Yeah. I could use that now.
Yeah, Steve and I were leads at the same time. He was a day lead and I was a night lead, and that was a good year at that time too.
Yeah.
Just walking the station and unloading and loading, and parties of two would come down the left side, parties of three on the right.
Occasional monkey.
An occasional flume.
Feel in our sleep. I used to say it, and not even like pay attention to what I was saying. It would just come out of my mouth,
Oh my God! What was it?
It was really fun to interact with the guests there. Everyone was really coming, excited about all the rides in the Western. They were all the premier rides.
Yeah.
So, we always had full queue houses, and, everybody was excited to get on the rides. It was a lot of fun just working the rides.
Well, I remember so when you were talking about the spiel, I remember all right, hello, welcome to the Flog Flume. Guests of 1 and 2, if you're a guest of 1 or 2, if you're in a group of 1 or 2, left side only. If you're in a group of 3 or more, come on the right side. Excuse me, you. Are you with anyone? Why are you on the right side? Go to the left side. I had so much fun. People out on that staircase, like, come on, listen to me. I'm on a large mic,
And then we'd say, keep your arms, legs, and hands inside the boat at all times, and put your tray tables in the upright positions. And we would just throw them in there.
I honestly think that's where I lost my introvertedness, was the mic on the log flume, because when I was at paddle boats, I was still quiet. I didn't, I wasn't like a loud, brash person like I am now and have been. But I think that log flume mic, that changed me, man. As soon as I got over the fear of the mic and I embraced it, then it was like, then I loved it, because then every ride I became an operator at, I was like, I love the microphone. I love the microphone.
Typhoon.
Oh my God, Typhoon. So much fun. All right, Andy, you got anything else? You want to pass it off to Debbie? What do you think?
Concerts is always great. Again,
I didn't even bring up the arena. I didn't even bring up the arena.
Hang out and anything going on in the arena. We had the laser show. We had earlier before my time, they had the big like the rodeos and the circus and stuff in there. But we had some pretty good
gladiator
concerts.
race. Do you remember that commercial from the 80s? The fucking gladiator race. I'm like, what was this? And I realized it had to be in the arena. It was like, holy cow.
Yeah, like chariots and everything.
Yeah.
But Friday, Saturday nights in Western, it was crazy down there. It was packed with people. It was and then most of them were in the concert. So even though the section would be packed, like the ride would be kind of empty for that hour. So you get a little break. Yeah.
I remember working the night of New Kids on the Block in Tiffany. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, it rained that day, so Mine Train was closed. So we got stuck doing crowd control for that. That was crazy.
And if I'm remembering right, Tiffany was still the headliner, even though they had to switch that tour in the middle to switch them over because New Kids got so damn big. But when they played that night at the arena, Tiffany was still the headliner, and like the crowd wasn't nice to her. Very nice to her because they were all New Kids fans. Like, I remember that. That was probably one of the toughest days to work in the Western.
I think that was one of the toughest, busiest days.
If I remember, they were really late.
Yeah.
Right. The
I was
neutral
working
were
in
like
foods,
2
and I
hours late.
remember long
Something
lines, like
happened.
ridiculous that day.
All right. Debbie, what about you? Anything we haven't touched on that you got in your
I
head?
think another great part about 120 and like the log flume, like potable area is that area under Best of the West, you know,
Fish
where the
food.
fish feeders were, right? And, you know,
Yeah,
I think
fish
we were
feeders,
talking about
uh-huh.
like when you were having like a stressful day or you just needed to like chill out a little bit or you're just like feeling overheated or whatever, it's a covered area and they had benches there too. And you can
Yep.
just either sit on the bench for a little bit and do whatever paperwork, or you can feed the fish, the Purina trout chow, you know, and you had a handful of that. And there's, and just chill out. And there's a little bathroom actually around the corner there by the, Best of the West restaurant. So, yeah.
Yep.
So just like a nice little quiet area that people just never really.
But did you have a reading bench?
I was just going to say, is that the original location?
Well, that's where
Maybe.
Steve and I used to like to do our shift change back there.
We did.
That one of
We
those
did,
tables on
absolutely.
the balcony at Best of the West in the back.
It really may be the original reading bench, if you want to know the truth. I got to remember if I ever had an actual book there. I don't remember, but it definitely probably was. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I know I had about 1 billion books on the top of the log flume. I mean, I used to bang out a book a day minimum working that ride, you know? But, yeah, no doubt. That whole shootout area, too, because in the back of shootout, so shootout was a Western shootout little, game where they sometimes put an employee there once in a while to do quarters, and then eventually they automated it, so they didn't even do that. But behind it was an old seasons past processing area, which they shut down. And so that was another place you could go to get away from people because it still had the stalls and everything. And then ironically, which I never knew the whole time I was there was an entire room in there, which I guess was the processing room, but it was hidden. And that became my office in my last year as a games full-timer. So that literally became my workshop, which was kind of ironic because it's like I started in Western and, because I don't count my orange tag days on 150. So I started in Western as a black tag and I ended in Western as a full-timer. So it's kind of funny in the shootout.
So how many years were you there, Steve?
84 to 97.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about you, Andy?
I was there from 87 to 96, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And the last, 2 were in games.
Right.
And then I spent a season and a half in 160, and then the rest all were in 120.
120, West is best.
That's right. What about you, Tony? What about you? What else in Western haven't we covered that makes you have a love for West? You've definitely been around. You haven't just been in West, although I think you did most of your time in West.
Yeah, so I mean, you guys mentioned a lot of things that really make the West best. So you touched on a lot of things, the big crews, the teamwork. It's funny listening to you guys talk about your crews back when you were black tags and red tags, and we were kind of the next generation after you guys, and the things that you mentioned, the same things that we just carried on, in our generation and probably generations after we left. But that camaraderie, those friendships are still active to this day, for the most part. So, that's the best thing about working in that section with the people we worked with. Like you said before, guests could piss you off, but you just laughed at them at the end of the day, and
for sure.
And that section of the park with the major rides, even if you were sent away to another ride for the day, you didn't complain because I loved every ride in that section. There was something cool about every single ride there that I enjoyed. With the exception of BBL, but like you said, it wasn't there for the whole time that I was in 120. And I didn't really actually go there that many times, but every ride had a special place in my heart for some reason. Coaster because it was my first ride. Cables just because it was like that ride had so much history to it, and it was a physically challenging ride to work. Especially if you're catching cable cars all day long, and there was kind of a badge of honor to, like I said, work a double there. You can work a double anywhere because that was a tough ride to work a whole day at, but it was fun. And the theming. I mean, you nailed hit the nail right on the head with that. I mean, it was one of the few sections in the park that had theming. I wasn't a huge fan of wearing the bandana with the Western outfit, but jean shorts, you could wear jean shorts, which was awesome, so that was good. Yeah. Before that, I wasn't around during the rainbow times, but I think we wore a uniform that looked like we were a gas station, an old-timey gas station attendant, with the bars on the top and the shorts. So that was fun. Log Flume was awesome, awesome ride to work on as well. So every ride there was great. Like you mentioned before, the concerts were there, which was cool. If you had the opportunity to be at Lift 2, you could watch the concert, listen to the concert. It was neat. So it was just has a special place in my heart. I met a lot of great people there, and I'll never forget it. Those of you who never, who bashed 120, most of you never worked there, Scott. But if you did for just one season, you would know why West is best.
Well, I did work the Viper as the babysitter for a couple.
That doesn't count.
I mean, that's like saying I was a tower soup. That doesn't count. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember that thing. They had that, didn't they?
They did. Yeah. There, another thing. If you were a soup in West, what was fantastic is that when Tony was saying it was really hard to work a double at Cables, and that's true. Like if you had to work a double at Cables, unless you were actually a Cables employee used to working Cables, it was rough. But if you were a soup, the best part about working in West is that we cross-trained like a motherfucker. So almost everybody that had half a brain was at least an operator on 3 rides, right? So you would make deals. So, if I had someone at Cables that I knew was just tired, but they were willing to work a double, I would say, okay, I could let you operate mine train. You just sit in the chair and operate for the rest of the night, and that's where you'll do your second shift, or I can let you operate coaster, or I can send you up top on the flume. You had a lot of leeway where you can send people in operator positions that, they could basically get an overtime and you can get them into a double, but they didn't have to kill them. You know what I mean? So you can move people around a lot, and you guys had that too, but you guys had it on flat rides. So it was a little bit easier for us. For us, it was a little bit tougher because you really wanted people to be operators to be able to make that deal with them. Because otherwise the only place you could put them without them having to kill themselves, because attendance on coasters, you're lap barring it. You're lap barring it all day. So it's not exactly an easier job than catching cars. It's the same thing. It's still tough, but log flume. That's really the only place you could put them, lift 1, shooter, spillway. Otherwise, it's like there wasn't a lot of spots you could put somebody. But if you had someone trained as an operator, lots of spots you could put them. So it was really, really easy, to like get people to do doubles there. So I was on a phone. I was on a phone with a mutual friend of everyone here who goes by the nickname of a Scooby-Doo character not too long ago. And we were playing a little memory jogging game. So I'm gonna play a game with you guys because I thought this was kind of fun, and I was surprised by how much I couldn't remember, which kind of bugged me. But I was happily surprised by how much I could remember. So Debbie, I'm gonna start with you. Deb, I'm calling you at 2127. Where am I calling you at? Oh, I can't believe you don't know this one. I know you know. I don't know how she doesn't know.
Well, I guess it's log flume the way you're saying.
Thank you. I thought I was giving you a whiffle here.
I thought it was 2124 for some reason, but yeah, 2127 log flume. Okay, good.
All right. So Andy, I'm calling you at 2131. Where are you at?
Oh, well, that's the mine train.
There you go. All right.
Coaster's 2144. Cables is 2119. Like all this stupid information is trapped in my
right. All right. So hold on. So
I know radios.
So Peluso, I'm going to throw you with a curveball because East is best. So I'm calling you at 2125. Where are you at?
Oh, I have no idea. I've replaced all these numbers with a whole slew of new nonsensical numbers.
Scott, help your East brother out. Where is he at? 2125.
25. I mean, for some reason, I'm thinking the big wheel, but
bingo. Yep, you got it. It's a big wheel. Nice. All right. Scott, I'm calling you at 2126. Where are you at? By the way, I didn't look any of these up because I can't find a phone number card. These are all off memory.
Yeah, I mean, I know 2137 was Rapids, 2126. Either Cables or Buccaneer. I don't know.
Nope.
It's Flying Wave.
It's the sister to Debbie's ride.
Oh, Riptide?
Yeah, remember how 26 was
Hydroflume.
was
You're
hydroflume
right.
and
You're
27
right.
was log flume.
Well,
All
there you
right.
go. I never worked hydroflume. I mean, I barely ever
You're the
did.
fucking supervisor there. Come
Scott
on.
calls it
If I had to guess, Neil will know every number.
It's such a good section. I don't even know the numbers of the rides I supervise.
I go there
Jesus.
to unload after a breakdown. That was about it.
No. All right.
Debbie, 2126 hydroflume.
Nice.
She knew.
Keep
She
them
wrote
coming.
it.
Keep them coming.
Tony, yours is going to be great. Tony, I could call you at one of two numbers. I'm going to give you your choice at which one I call you at. I could call you at 2119 or 2118. Where would you prefer I call you at? Oh, by the way, I told you they were going to break the door.
Yes, yes. I was hoping they'd make an appearance.
2119.
Why would you want me to call you at 2119?
Because I believe, and Andy kind of gave it away earlier, that was Western Cables. I believe.
And West is best.
And
That's
West
right.
is
You don't want to
best.
be called no suck aside. Come on.
Nice.
Not on the east side, no.
Well, East Side, man. You know, we had that VW engine where you could choke on the
drive
fumes and
and-
break down.
I love it. All right, guys, we have 15 more minutes. What else do we have to talk about, man? You guys have anything that you could think of on the West?
What were your favorite
You know what I
concerts?
was thinking? Last night we had these crazy thunderstorms roll through here, and I was remembering like what Western was like on a day when the weather was bad, which was great because pretty much every ride was closed. Because if it was just raining, the log flume might be chugging along with nobody on it. You'd be running like 12 boats. But all the other rides would be closed, and we would just sit and basically hang out all day.
There were sometimes when we would be on the log flume, though, and there'd be lightning, and then everybody would be scared to be up there. And then we were told, oh, it's only cloud to cloud lightning. You can stay up there.
Yeah, right.
That was the first
No,
part,
you're
so-
okay. Just stay up there.
Yeah, you're fine. It's only cloud to cloud. It'll stop.
Yeah, like that's a real thing, you know.
Right. I know. But that's what we were told. Our ride stayed. we were down in station and we were fine, but the other people up there, I felt bad, but we had to tell them that we were open. Yeah.
I used to love when
But I remember cables getting hit by lightning a lot. I remember when the TP got hit by lightning.
Oh yeah. I always
remember
loved
Rolling
when,
Thunder getting hit.
Yeah,
I do too. I always loved when storms would come in so freaking fast that the wind came in like a hurricane, and before the cables would shut down, you would just suddenly see every car going, vroom, 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 and you're like, oh, we're getting a high wind. Oh, we're getting a high wind. Yeah.
You're praying for it. You're willing it to happen with your cables work. You're like, come on, you can do it.
You can do it.
Tony, where was the wind meter at? Which side had the wind meter that you could turn the dials down to make it happen?
Oh,
Yeah, that was the only thing
Who
that
had
you
the
got
magic?
going for you on that side.
Like, just turn the dials down just a little bit.
Yeah. There were some days we used to pray for that high wind. And I remember we used to do high wind dances, all kinds of things. Yeah.
It was like, supervisors would pray for it too, because if that happened, they had like staffing for once. It's like, like all these people.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say that I didn't, ask for a high wind that suddenly occurred when I needed to do breaks, and then suddenly there wasn't a high wind anymore. I'm not going to say that happened.
45 minutes of a high wind. Sometimes it happens like that.
I may or may not have any recollection of that. Getting those calls when I was the lead there.
Brief squall.
And I was like, as the lead of the Dream Street side, you were like the break maker, like the rainmaker, like, oh, everybody gets lunch breaks now.
True.
I remember one time on cables, and I think Andy was my supervisor at the time. It was a really super slow day. There was like nobody in the park. And, there was a thing creating a tower to tower gap, right? You would have like a gap where you could kind of go run get a glass of water or something like that, right? We created a full tower gap. Like we had like hardly any cars on. We held some cars on Western, some cars on Dream Street. So there were no cars running on cables. And I think it was Andy, I'm pretty sure, came like running up the stairs. What happened? Why is cables down? We're like, no, it's running. Look at the wire. It's moving. It's just no guts in the park.
Yeah, you fuckers had some fucked up sense of humor on that side, because I recall some nights where I'm working a double shift, and out of the darkness, because you can't see shit coming in, all of a sudden you got 4 cars back to back.
It'll put me to the test a little bit, you know.
And like
you're
no
awake.
phone call, no warning, and then you're catching. You got to stop 4 cars at the same time, full of a bunch of large people, and then you call over and like give you some shit about it, and you just laugh like, yeah, that was funny, fuckers.
And you're saying you guys never did the same thing, because we used to get that too.
I mean, I personally never did it, but
yeah. But that was just to make sure you guys were awake on the other side, make sure you guys were on your toes.
Yeah. But then there was also times when both sides of the cables would actually work as a team, and Western be like, we don't want to pee in the pit. Can you actually just make a big gap so one of us can take a leak?
Make a gap, yeah.
I remember, establishing some gaps for, various reasons.
Yeah.
That's just such a fond memory, though, of seeing that large group where it almost, you can't even imagine that they're all in there. There's like arms hanging out.
Yeah.
They're so stuffed in, and it's coming at you, and you're just like, I'm going to grab this thing. I can still remember that.
They were under that 600-pound weight limit in a car. And
I think the most people I saw in one cable car was like 8, maybe 9.
Yeah.
Happens sometimes.
It's funny because
car.
That's a memory that's been literally purged from my mind until you just said that. And like, I literally just remembered the worst cable car. As you're saying it, it popped right into my head. The worst, heaviest cable car I ever had to catch on the Dream Street side, though. And it made it almost all the way to the corner before I could slow it down. And I wasn't weak. Like back then, I was pretty goddamn strong. But it was so fucking heavy that even with my feet down, I was like, I'm going to break an ankle. I'm going to twist an ankle trying to stop this car.
I worked out a lot then, too. And I just remember, like I said, I remember the arms more than anything dripping outside. They were so stuffed in.
Oh, yeah. Like 4 big guys stuffed in there.
So good.
And the best side had the bigger cars at the time before they took the old ones out and made the smaller ones.
That's right.
Yeah, I remember vividly those phone calls I'd get from Tony on the Western end, asking for a bathroom break gap, and I'd be like, "Well, Tony, is it a number 1 or a number 2 kind of gap?" Oh, this is a number 2 gap. All right, Tony, here you go.
Yeah,
1 gap or 2.
Marcus Noble just posted in the comments at Dream Street Cables, we would coordinate with parachutes to turn down the wind speed dial. I actually remember that too. I forgot about that, but I remember coordinating that. We've done that before too. That's pretty funny. And Debbie King said the reason she left 140, she got tired of being called Queen of the Flat Rides. I totally remember that title too.
Nice.
Oh man, yeah, that's not a title you want to wear with pride, except when you get older. At the time you're like, just get me out of here, man. You know what I never got to do? I never got to work coaster. I don't even think I got to ride coaster when it went backwards, because that was after my time. Did any of you guys ever get to ride the coaster backwards when they did that?
I heard it was in 1980 for the some kind of coaster anniversary or something like that. People always told us about it, but we never saw it.
I know they did it after my time. I don't remember them doing it. That would have had to been before my time then.
Yeah, no, I know my brothers did. I was
that was
scared
before us.
That bums
I
me
think
out,
that was like
man.
early 80s, super early 80s.
That kind of bums me out. I would have loved to have ridden that thing backwards. That had to be pretty cool.
I never rode a roller coaster until I started working at the park.
Really?
Oh, wow.
I did one.
Fast.
I'm with you, Debbie. I was a scaredy cat. I rode one, and it was Runaway Train. That was my first coaster.
That was my first one too.
Yeah. And then I wasn't big on the rides.
That's a good gateway coaster. It's like a stepping stone to the coasters of. So
that's a good ride. I like it. I mean,
it was fun
and everything. Yeah, it's fast. It's good.
Yeah.
You also learn pretty quick if you're in rides whether or not you're afraid of heights. Like real fucking fast. You learn if you're afraid of heights, because it's funny. Up until I started working in rides, I thought I was afraid of heights, and then the first time I walked that coaster track, I was like, I'm not afraid of heights anymore. Clearly,
right?
Same
thing. I thought I was too, and
funny.
then I guess I wasn't anymore. You get over it very quickly. Yeah.
But it's funny how now, that kind of freaks me out now, being up high. Like that. But back then, you'd be unloading the mine train in a power failure during a thunderstorm, 50, 60 feet up in the air in
Yeah.
strong winds with nothing around you and didn't even think about it.
Yeah, no, first thing I would do in free fall position, get in the car and lean back against that, it was about 3 feet high, the other side of the car, just lean back on it and start talking to everybody as casual as possible, no worries, just, 130 feet or so.
Hey, we got a couple of old 120 people popping up in here. Debbie Faye, Michelle Gresner, i.e. Simone. Yeah. I used to love going up on the top of the mine train, man. Mine train was one of those rides where it's one of the only rides that I ever kind of lost my shit on guests that just didn't want to evacuate. And I was like, then I'll fucking leave you here. I'll just leave you here. You want to be left here? Because I'll fucking leave you here. And I would just start walking down the thing with the rest of the guests. And all of a sudden that person would be like, all right, I'm coming.
That's awesome. Now, did that have saddle zones? I can't remember. Didn't that have saddle zones?
I let Andy talk about the mine train saddle.
Yeah, right.
Mine train would saddle in a high wind, and
yes.
Setups were terrible. That's why you had to work so quickly. Like Michelle said, when that train would set up, you'd either have to run up the lip or we'd be having to push it off the safety brakes, like literally up there running, trying to push.
Oh my God, I forgot about those days. We all went up there and had to push it. That was so
had enough speed where it wouldn't saddle. Yeah,
that was so dangerous and so fun.
Run the train off this catwalk. And talk about not being scared of heights. We're literally pushing this train on a little catwalk way up high in the air.
Wow.
So do you think you do this at other parks too? They send the employees out to push the train.
I mean, I got to.
You'd never get me to do that now, and I did it back then for $3.
I can't even imagine what they do on a pier, or a boardwalk or something like that. I will
say one of the things I always loved was that my last 2 years as a soup, we used to go to Seaside, and all their fucking rides, like their flume and everything, they were all arrow paddles. They ran off the same damn keys. So we would just fuck with those rides because they would never have anyone up top. We'd be shutting them down from up top because we knew how to control paddles. We'd be putting our own keys in and turning the shit off and running away. Like the havoc we created in those little areas, like this shit. It was horrible. It was really horrible, man.
Wow.
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, it looks like we are running into the end of our time, man. So, sadly, we're gonna have to wrap up. This was awesome. Awesome.
Definitely.
I look forward to hearing what the East Side brings to the conversation.
So do I.
I will point out, I do have a Western shirt on. Andy has his Western Elvis gear on right now, so we're
it's more
showing
Hawaiian than Western, but I'll go with it.
From our camera angle, you look like the king, my friend. You look like the king. So.
Western king.
All right. Well, thanks again to our two special guests for joining us. We will sign off. I am Steve Hicks. You're welcome. My co-hosts are
Scott Loudon,
Chris Peluso.
You're a co-host now, Andy.
Andy Auletti.
And Debbie Levine and Tony Rosa. Thanks, everybody. Until next time, as always, make it a great day. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Make it a great day.
Maybe say 1099.